Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there will be no temporary ceasefire unless all hostages held by Hamas are freed. That's despite Secretary of State Antony Blinken calling for a pause today as he met with Israeli leaders in Tel Aviv. Meantime, in his first public remarks since the conflict began, Hezbollah's leader praised Hamas's attacks on Israel while adding that Hezbollah's primary goal is a ceasefire. Hassan Nasrallah said the possibility of a larger regional conflict with Israel is a, quote, realistic option. Joining us now to discuss is Washington Post columnist Josh Rogin. Josh, great to be with you. The leader of Hezbollah making a lot of threats, but nothing really specific.
Right. There were basically three parts to his speech. There were the denials. You know, we didn't do it. We didn't know about it. He's talking about the October 7th Hamas attacks. Said this was Palestinian run. They didn't tell anybody. Then the threats, which are, you know, if Israel doesn't do A, B, and C, we could widen the war. That stops short of an actual promise to for Hezbollah to join in the fighting, right. Which is what I'm sure a lot of Hamas terrorists were hoping for. So in that sense, it could come as a disappointment to Hamas. But he promised to keep up the minimal attacks on Israel, to keep them busy, to keep them occupied, and to make sure that they can't fully devote their resources to Gaza. And then there was some pretty, conventional analysis in this speech. He said basically that he thinks Israel has bitten off more than it can chew, that they've set overly ambitious and lofty goals, and that they should have learned the lesson about doing that in past invasions, including the 2006 war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. And I think that's like pretty standard analysis. So, I mean, in a sense, he's mixing his lies with the truth.
Not a surprise for him to ask for a ceasefire. He joins a chorus of people that have suggested that there should be a pause in the action, whether you want to call it a pause or a ceasefire, etc. Israel has been reluctant to stop its retaliatory attacks on Gaza. The U.S. has tried to pressure Israel to do so, but it doesn't seem to be actually carrying weight with the Israelis.
Well, that's right. That's what Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the region to do. He's not there to stop the war. He's there to help manage the war. He's there to set some sort of processes where they could keep fighting for what could be weeks or months or even longer. And this idea of having humanitarian pauses is not new. Mm-hmm. The idea of getting fighters out, even getting sick civilians out, getting some people who are trapped out, getting some aid in. They do this in Ukraine. They've been doing it in Syria for 12 years. It's a complicated thing where every side has to get something. And right now, the negotiating positions are too far apart for it to work. That's what he's there to do, to narrow those positions, sure, to set a precedent so that they can keep fighting, not so that they can stop fighting. So far, no, he hasn't been successful, and it doesn't seem like either side is listening.
The Israeli argument is that if they stop, then Hamas can regroup and that they won't release hostages, but rather that they'll strengthen for more terrorist attacks. Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, I don't think there's any scenario where you can bomb 24 hours a day, 7 days a week forever. At some point, this humanitarian option is going to have to come into play. We're seeing it play out a little bit in Rafah. Somehow all the sides managed to get to the point where they can let some people out and some aid in. That's the basis of it, okay? And the Israeli position is logical from their perspective, but untenable. In the end, eventually they're going to have to come to some sort of way to get the aid in, to get people out who need to get out. And if the United States can play a role in brokering that, great, but it's just we're not there yet.
Yeah, Josh, I want to ask about your most recent column in the Post talking about Capitol Hill and the bill that was pushed forward by new House Speaker Mike Johnson, essentially offering $14 billion in aid to Israel, but it comes with a caveat that a lot of folks on Capitol Hill would not support cuts to IRS funding that would grow the U.S. deficit. You say that this is politically dangerous.
I think it's actually materially dangerous. We have people fighting in Israel and also in Ukraine, by the way, who are running out of ammunition. The Ukrainians are running out of money. The funding is not assured. And it's bad enough that for 3.5 weeks we didn't have a Speaker of the House, and the war is going on in Israel, and the Congress has done exactly nothing. And now what the new Speaker has done is he's passed a bill that has a policy rider that would partially defund the IRS, which is a non-starter. In other words, it's not going to become law. So politically, it makes sense for him to placate his right wing, but practically, it's very dangerous for the Israelis and for the Ukrainians, who are waiting in line behind the Israelis for another bill that we haven't even seen yet. And so this is going to take weeks to go back and forth between the House and the Senate before they come up with some scheme that makes everybody equally unhappy. And it's Israelis and Ukrainians who are paying that deadly price. And this is when our dysfunction results in our enemies benefiting and our allies twisting in the wind. And in many cases, it could be either party, but in this case, it's the House Republicans.
Josh Rogin, always a pleasure. Got to leave the conversation there. Thanks,
Anytime.
Josh. Of course.